So I was asked, what do you do when a police officer stops you and he says, can I have your driver's license? What's the alternative?
Give me a telephone call, Dave.
First, you'd be nice. Most guys are treated badly. So treat them as your neighbor until they prove otherwise. So I always reach out and I shake their hand. I said, hey officer, how you doing? I hope you're having a good day and you're being safe out there. I really want you to go home to your family. And I truly mean it. Okay. Then he says, can I have your driver's license, proof of insurance, and registration? I reach over and I grab my insurance card. I say, yep, same company since 1979. And I set it down right there on the console out of his reach. He says, can I have your driver's license? I say, nope. And I whip out my passport, I hand it to him, I say, this is the only document I use while I'm traveling. That's it. It's the only document I use while I'm traveling. And that's not true.
Can use the card.
Because I also use this document while I'm traveling. And I like the Cato Institute ones because they're exactly the same size as the passport. Right? You can carry them together. The very first paragraph in the passport says the Secretary of State of the United States of America. Now, you'd agree he has a little more clout than a police officer, right? Hereby requests all whom it may concern, that's you, the cop, to permit the citizen or national, that's me, of the United States named herein to pass without delay or hindrance. What does that mean?
Can't violate color.
Be on your way, sir. Have a nice day. I won't detain you any longer. That's what that means. And in case of need, to offer all lawful aid and protection. That's the very first paragraph in the passport. It's a commandment from the Secretary of State to the officer to let me pass without delay or hindrance. And in the case of need, to offer all lawful aid and protection. That means if my wife's in the backseat having a baby, and I'm on my way to the hospital doing 100, he better get in front of me and drive awfully fast with his lights on to clear the highway for me, or I'm going to pass him. That's an emergency, you see. That's very important to know, and it's very important to tell them in a very nice and friendly manner. Okay. You don't usually have to. Cops know this stuff. Believe it or not. And when you say it the way I said it, that you're not a driver or operator of a motor vehicle. You're traveling in your private automobile. And there's lots of Supreme Court cases that says you can do that. I've got a file folder on the dash of my pickup that I used to educate police officers with. The 60 pages of Supreme Court case law saying I can do just this. And I don't need a driver's license. Do I have one? Yeah, I have one. If I ever decide to operate an Uber, I'll be legal. Or when I haul a load of hay for my ranch in a semi-truck to Idaho, I use my driver's license.
Can you repeat that exact thing tomorrow so we get it again?
How long does it take?
For you, I will. Okay.
But how long does it take to be that secure to be able to do it that right?
I'm usually, I have literally, there was one person who
How
used to
many times have
stay,
you gotten pulled over, Dave?
lots. And there was one person I used to be in contact with every time. I'd get on the telephone and I'd text. And I'd say, guess what? He's behind me with his red and blue lights on.
Felony number 1.
And the reason I text is to establish a time limit. And then I'd pull off the highway. And I'd stop and I'd go through the whole thing. Hi, how are you? How you doing? Here's my passport, blah, blah, blah. He goes back, he scans it, says, do not stop, do not detain. He walks back up, says, hands it to me, he says, be on your way, I will not detain you any longer. And I pull back onto the highway and I text. I said, guess what? I'm on the highway.
Because every time that they pull you over and it's under a court of law use, then aren't you entitled to remedy?
And she texted me back and says, that was 1 minute and 27 seconds.
That's worth about 20 grand.
That was my fastest. I did 3 minutes and 6 seconds. But usually within 1 to 3 minutes, I'm back on the road. It's that simple, that easy. No ticket, no nothing. Been doing it over 10 years.
You know,
Been
question,
stopped
why are they
50,
pulling, why are
60
they pulling
times.
you over? Are they pulling you over because you are,
Expired registration by chance, no please?
no, are you going faster?
Well, of
Like-
course I do.
Okay, so because you don't have to follow their speed, you don't follow the speed sign.
It's a limit.
If I put my seatbelt on or I put my turn signal on, it's because I care about my neighbor, not because there's some statute that says I have to. Nowadays, in my own town, in my own county, I drive down the road without my seatbelt. I'm talking on the phone. I wave at them as they go by. I turn the corner without putting my turn signal on, and none of them pull me over.
Wasted.
Because every single one of them knows I beat them every time.
So you actually commit a crime, right?
Earned it.
Yeah. In the last, I don't know, year and a half, I've been stopped twice in New York. I've been stopped in Montana. I've been stopped in Minnesota. Get stopped all over the place.
You have regular plates.
Yeah, they've been expired for 10 years. I don't care anything about that.
How's that?
It's like to be worth something.
Because I quit paying. I quit registering.
That's awesome.
Registration's been expired.
Yeah, that's expensive to register.
I don't care.
Especially when you drive a truck.
Were you arrested at some point?
I've never been arrested. Not one single time in my life. I've been to court many, many, many times. And I beat them every time I go to court. American State National. I have limited diplomatic immunity as per the Geneva Conventions.
Do they think when it pulls over now that it's kind of like a waste of time before it's done now?
Okay,
That's why they don't anymore.
I'm confused because I have someone that is tooth and nail telling me that there are no such things as real estate national
Really?
based on their definitions of what they call state national. And
It's Title 8, 1101A21.
I laughed.
I don't think you said that.
1101A21. Someone who owes their allegiance to a state.
So like
Like
Colorado State as opposed to the state of
1101.
Colorado, is there a difference? I know too much language.
Colorado is as different from Oregon as Spain is to France,
Right.
or Italy, or England.
Well, I thought,
They're different nation states.
but isn't the terminology one because the state of Colorado tied to the District of Columbia as opposed to the Colorado State, which is landmass?
Since you're talking terminology,
Got it.
this was what I was going to go over.
Can I ask one?
Very, very important question right here. And I have won entire court cases by doing exactly what I'm telling you right now. Once you appear in court, you always appear by special appearance. Always, that's how you appear.
Do you have to tell them it's by special appearance?
Yeah,
When
the
you-
first
before you walk
document
in,
you should
before
ever
you-
file is how you're going to appear. It's a notice of appearance. That's your first document you file in a court case. Notice of appearance. It tells them how you're going to appear. Because what are they doing? They're sending out a summons. What is a summons? It's a seance. They're calling it in. What is a warrant? It's a war rant. They are declaring war. Okay? It's a war rant. All right. So here it is. Judge, what is the law? Where did its origins come from? How did we arrive at this thing called law where a small group of men could put something down on paper and hold me in the counter? Judge, won't answer. How did they answer that question? I'll tell you what, I've had very few of them answer it. And when they do answer it, they give you a lame ass answer. Like, oh, we write statutes down so society can control itself. No, so society don't control itself. Everybody's self-governed. Okay, they don't need something down on paper to control themselves. Where does origins come from? Guys, Genesis 1, 26 through 28. God gave me, man, dominion over the land and everything therein, the air and everything therein, and the water and everything therein.
So what happened to you every time?
This is law. He gave me dominion. We, the people, laid down the law. Not some small group of men. We, the people, laid down the law. Land became common law. That's that book you had a minute ago? That is property, equity, but most of all, rights. That's what type of law it is. This is what the type of law is called, and this is what gave it its jurisdiction. Air became ecclesiastical or canon law. Doesn't look right, I think it's canon law, which is trust law. The water became admiralty or commerce, and that is contract law. The air's up there, the land's right here, and you go into the water and you drown. It's a good way to remember it because this is the highest form of law. This is second, and this, you drown. You gotta be dead. But God still gave us dominion. That means if I want to write a contract between two men, and it is good for both of us, and there's a meeting of the minds, and there's full and honest disclosure, and there's terms of the contract, and there's proper consideration, and there's two wedding signatures, and there's privity of contract, now I have a lawful contract. What is a legal contract? Tacit agreement. Of you being a citizen, person, resident, so they have jurisdiction. And it's based on presumption, assumption, and hearsay. And you acquiescing and not rebutting. So just because you don't answer them, you lost.
Great, silence.
Right. Air, land, water. This is law. Okay. These are three jurists. The word juris means right law. Which of those three is the right law? Well, you don't know yet. Because you don't know the diction. The word jurisdiction, diction means words. The words you use determines the juris, or the right law under which you stand. That's why they call it legalese. Because just because it's English, it really doesn't matter if it's English, French, Japanese. There's 3 different languages, a language for each type of law. Like, as a free man, I can travel in private upon the highways in my automobile with nothing more than my passport as my papers and my protection, and I am lawful. Or, with my driver's license, I can drive or operate a motor vehicle upon the roadways, and I am legal. As long as I follow all the statutes, have insurance, and whatever else they tell me that I have to have, and then I'm legal. Those 2 sentences I just said mean the same thing. Going down the road in the car, right? You're going from point A to point B. You're either driving and operating your motor vehicle upon the roadways with your driver's license in commerce to get there, or you're traveling in private upon the roadways or highways as a free man. What does as a free man mean? It means without encumbrance, right? Without encumbrance. To be free means you don't answer to anybody. You don't have any encumbrances on you. The diction we use determines which juris we're in. Now, governments operate in this jurisdiction. So, judge, when the prosecutor misused the word jurisdiction a minute ago, and he really meant to say locus or venue, because it's in the city's venue or the county's venue or the state's venue or this agency or that agency or the federal government's venue, but he was calling it jurisdiction. Doesn't the city, the county, the state, and the federal government all operate in contractual law, in admiralty, in commerce? So they're all in the same jurisdiction. Every one of them. So say the Bar Association has misled, they know this, they've misled the general public on purpose to confuse you. On purpose. This is the most misused word in the law. And they did it on purpose to confuse you. So you would know what juris means, which is the right law. You wouldn't know the words to use to determine which law you're in. If I'm a trustee or a beneficiary, and I use those words, I'm operating in the jurisdiction of the air, ecclesiastical law under trust law. But if I'm a debtor or a creditor, I'm in contract law. Or if I'm a party, I'm in contract law. If I'm a people dealing with my neighbor, I'm in property, equity, rights. You can, just the very words you use, and this is why sovereign citizens get a bad name, because they don't know the language, so they put it in their documents, and they mix up all 3 of these jurisdictions in their documents by using all kinds of words that screw them, and they don't know why. They don't even know why they walked out of that courtroom a loser. And it was just the words that they used. And the acceptance of being a person, a citizen, a resident. But if you could walk in there under special appearance as a man, now you're the only one in the room with standing, status, standing, jurisdiction, or everything in the law. It's everything in the law. they have to establish staff standing in their jurisdiction before they can even operate. So they do it by presuming you're a citizen or person or resident, assuming you committed some crime, and they use hearsay to build a story or a case against you. In fact, they call that syllogism. And in 50 years, I'd never heard that word until I was on an airplane to Zurich with a bunch of international banking attorneys. And they were talking amongst each other, and I was over listening and overhearing. And after about 4 hours, I just couldn't help myself. So I got into the conversation and I started talking to them. And they go, well, who are you? What do you do? And I said, well, my name's David Strait. I'm just a farm boy from a mill town in Oregon. And they go, you're David Strait? You're the guy the Bar Association's trying to shut down right now. And I said, shut down? What are they trying to do that for? I said, and by the way, how are they going to do that? They can't shut me down. And one of them spoke up. And he says, they're going to use syllogism to shut you down. And the others looked at him like that. You weren't supposed to say that. And I said, syllogism? How do you spell that?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that.
And so then I went and looked it up. And what does syllogism mean?
Shut you down.
No. Syllogism is a method of coming to a conclusion based on two statements that relate to each other but aren't necessarily fact. One of them could be a lie. And if it relates, they can draw a conclusion based on it. I'll give you for instance. All dogs have 4 legs. Dogs are animals. Therefore, all animals have 4 legs. Now, what's the problem with that statement? Not all animals have 4 legs. But that's the conclusion they use to put you in jail. Because they use syllogism to do it. How'd they do that? Because you didn't rebut all animals have 4 legs. You didn't rebut it. There's 12 presumptions of court, and you must rebut every presumption of court. If you rebut 10 of them, they can use the other 2 to form a conclusion and destroy you with it. You don't even know why you lost. So, we can talk about the 12 presumptions of court. Yes. See, after that airplane flight, I got to the hotel and I wrote this. Okay. And I use it as an exhibit in all my documents because I actually rebutted the whole document. See exhibit number 001-1. And every presumption is here, multiple presumptions. Then I give the definition of syllogism at the bottom. So they told me what bullet they were going to use, and I use it against them.
That's good, right?
That's all the stakes.
Like,
You screwed up. So, presumption number 1. The presumption of public record. That's a presumption of court. The presumption of public record is that any matter brought before a lower Roman court is a matter for the public record, when in fact it is presumed by the members of the private bar guild that the matter is a private bar guild business matter. So they're presuming in court that it's a private business matter. That's why no cameras in the courtroom. Very sneaky. So you have to rebut this, right? Unless openly rebuked and rejected by stating clearly the matter is to be on the public record, the matter remains a private bar guild matter completely under private bar guild rules. Interesting. The presumption of public service. The presumption of public service is that all members of the private bar guild who have sworn a solemn, secret, absolute oath to their guild then act as public agents of government. That's a presumption that they're acting as public agents of government. What does acting mean? To get up on stage, lie convincingly enough to make you believe in character and the plot. Or public officials by making additional oaths of public office that openly and deliberately contradict their private superior oath to their own guild. Our members take multiple oaths. First to the guild. Okay? Unless openly rebuked and rejected, the claim stands that these private bar guild members are legitimate public servants and therefore trustees under public oath. Think about this stuff. And you guys can all have this paper. All you gotta do is send me a little text, say, hey, can you send me the 12 presumption court? And then when I get a chance, I'll send it. The presumption of public oath is that all members of the private bar guild acting in the capacity of public officials who have sworn that oath to remain bound by that oath, and therefore bound to serve honestly, impartially, and fairly as dictated by that oath. This is a presumption of court, something that we presume. Unless openly challenged and demanded, the presumption stands that the private bar guild members have functioned under their public oath in contradiction to their guild oath. If challenged, the individuals must recuse themselves as having a conflict of interest and cannot possibly stand under the public oath. That's right, this is how we get judges off the bench. Tim Holmes's case, 5 judges so far. Every case he's had, we've got the judge recused.
That's why they keep flying in new judges.
Yep.
I thought they were doing that so that they wouldn't individually get in trouble. They were doing that on purpose.
Because
It
we're
was
calling
they
them
didn't-
out.
Okay.
Gosh,
Yeah.
Kurt Pendergrass stood in court with me standing beside him and called that judge out 3 times for capital felony treason on the record, and it went unrebutted by them. No one in that courtroom had seen anything like it, I guarantee it. Yeah. Absolutely amazing thing to watch. The judge dismissed his case and recused himself, and then they just brought another case against him. You know, one right after another. That's what they're doing. Keep him tied up.
Going through that same process.
It's almost over,
Okay.
but that's a long
So all the
story.
judges are
How difficult when you're awakening to these things. It is, it just keeps going on and on and on and on.
Yeah. But once you're awake, now you understand that they don't really have any authority anyway. Why are you doing what they ask you to do?
But we do.
We would
Yeah.
fear.
Don't have to,
Don't
not once you
include you,
learn.
right?
Only by consent.
Okay?
Right.
Government operates via the consent of the government.
Okay, so question, if his case is dismissed, then why does he go into court the next time? Why does he say, I'm not gracing the doors of court again?
You have to show up.
You have to get so
If you
good.
don't show up, which he didn't
You have
the
to get out
last
of the boat.
time, they put out a warrant. Now here's the problem. They knew they were in trouble already, so they put out a warrant that wasn't good anywhere else except in that county, because they want him to stay out of the county.
Oh.
So he moved out of the county. The presumption of immunity is that key members of the private bar guild in the capacity of public officials acting as judges, prosecutors, and magistrates who have sworn a solemn public oath in good faith are immune from personal claims of injury and liability unless openly challenged and their oath demanded. The presumption stands that the members of the private bar guild as public trustees, acting as judges, prosecutors, and magistrates, are immune from any personal accountability for their actions. That's why they tell everybody they're immune. That's why everybody believes they're immune. Because no one stands up and says, wait a minute, Judge, you have 2 oaths. I want your oaths of office.
So you
Not
have
your
to say
oath of office.
oaths.
Your oaths of
So
office.
that's it.
You have to ask for their oaths of office. The number 5 is the presumption of summons, is that by custom a summons unrebutted stands. A summons unrebutted stands. Okay? And therefore one who attends court is presumed to accept a position as a defendant, juror, or witness, and they accept jurisdiction of the court. That's why you go and say, I'm here by special appearance.
Because that takes you out of
General jurisdiction. You're challenging jurisdiction. Unless the summons is rejected and returned with a copy of the rejection filed prior to choosing to visit or attend, jurisdiction and position as the accused in the existence of guilt stands. So if you take your summons, rebut it, and send it back in, the court may probably not ever show up on the record.
So you don't have to go in.
45-degree angle with a
No,
red
the bankers, is that the
Sharpie
bankers?
on anything you get. If you get a traffic ticket, maybe that cop's an asshole and he gives me a traffic ticket. You take the ticket and in a 45-degree angle with a red Sharpie, you say your offer to contract is not acceptable of traveling in a private automobile. You are operating under Title 18, Section 242, under the Colorado law. And I do not accept your offer. And you mail it into the court, and you do it within 72 hours. Huh? No need. You're just rejecting it.
What title was that? Title 18, section?
242. And if there's 2
Is
or
that
more
state though, or is
officers,
that-
then 241 applies as well.
Are those the state or the federal? Like, do we have to look them up for our state?
United States
Oh, code.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just have to read that and memorize the
The
code.
United States Code was put there by we the people to hold our government officials
Fine.
accountable,
Yeah, but
and no other reason.
Religious power.
I wanna
Really
feel
No.
bad.
So
I don't
You
say.
want them to leave you alone.
I've been told that I don't have to sign it, and it still holds.
Well, it does still hold, unless you
Until
rebut.
unless I rebut. Okay, so that's what it is. So what do you do about toll tickets then? Because they suspended my license
Okay.
and stuff.
Well, do you notice they're moving all the toll booths off to the off-ramps?
Yeah.
Because the federal government has already sued most of the states. New York took all theirs off the main interstates and put them under the off-ramps. The reason why is they cannot regulate, the state cannot regulate interstate commerce.
Oh my goodness.
And that's a federal interstate highway. Okay, the state is not allowed to regulate federal interstate commerce. They can only regulate state commerce.
So,
So they move the toll booths to the off-ramps, and then they can collect a tax. Because you're coming from federal property onto the state property, and they can tax you. You're coming into the state every time you get off an off-ramp off the interstate. So that's why they're moving all the toll booths, because I think they were given 5 years. You know, all the states that had toll booths on interstate highways got sued by the federal
well,
government.
and then in Denver, they have like a whole different section in the middle that's like HOV tolling. And you don't have to have HOV, so you don't have to have one person, but you can get more interstate. So it's like, so at that point, that's state jurisdiction.
I don't know if Colorado got sued or not. I know Illinois and New York did. Pennsylvania and
So every single toll that they have is not on the interstate highways. They have them on separate roadways.
Okay, yeah,
So they did that years ago.
okay.
David, the bankers 45 degree accepted as, we had the conversation, you can accept it as paid in full, the banker's note. You said that it hadn't worked since 1999, since the bankrupt. My paralegal used it in 2008, he said it worked.
It can work, however, a lot of people that use it, if they use it more than once, they use it often. This is the reason I don't tell people to use it.
Okay,
Because if they use it too often, they go to jail just like Heather and Tucci.
oh,
The minute they try and get money out of their trust, they go to jail because they didn't do it properly.
oh,
So
Okay.
they're committing fraud. Whether they want to charge somebody or not for a one-time use, it's up to them. Heather went out and bought a motor home and a Corvette, I think, a Jeep for her husband. Paid off her house with it, did all kinds of things. And they went, hold on a minute there, girl. And they locked her up. Anyway, I told her we were going to. I told Bruce Duquette a year and a half before they put him in jail for screwing up. And he didn't listen. The presumption of summons is that by custom, a summons unrebutted stands, and therefore one who attends court. Okay, that's the one. All right. The presumption of custody is that by custom, a summons or warrant for arrest unrebutted stands, and therefore one who attends court is presumed to be a thing, and therefore liable to be detained in custody by custodians. Custody. Custodians. This includes the dead, legal, fiction, non-human person that corporate government's rules and regulations are written for. Read every state statute. Start with section number 1, and it says, all persons shall be subject to blah, blah, blah. All persons shall be subject to blah, blah, blah. Every state statute starts off that way. All persons shall be subject to. Well, good. Let that person be subject to it. I'm not one of them. You see what I mean?
so does that mean we don't have to show up for court?
That's why I said person. Says,
Right.
no, they'll put a warrant out for
But they,
you
on the person,
on the person. And
but
some
as long as I prove
officer
I'm a people,
will say, you look just like that person. You got the same fingerprints or the same footprint or the same, you've been claiming to be that person your whole life.
yeah, but if they take you in, they
That's why
can't
you go in.
own their house when you're done.
Hold on a minute.
you know?
That's why you go into court. For one simple reason and one reason only. To rebut their presumptions, assumptions, and hearsay. See, they got a motto. Their motto says, no fact or truth shall be tried in court. Did you hear what I just said? No fact or truth shall be tried in court. That's the Bar Association motto. They even printed it a few times in their ABA journal. That's because everything they do is based on presumption, assumption, and hearsay. Met this kid the night before his court case. The night before he was going on trial. A whole bunch of weapons charges. They were doing it right. And I started telling him this stuff. I spent about 3 hours on the phone telling him kind of the stuff I'm telling you here. And his, let me tell you a quick story. I wasn't going to take this much time, but it's a small group. All right. His wife sent him to Safeway to pick up a few items at the grocery store. While he's in Safeway, he runs into 2 of his old friends from high school that he hadn't seen in 10 years. He was a young dad, owning his own home, had a decent job, nice car, nice cute little family, nice wife, a couple of small kids. And he says, why don't you guys come on over tonight? I'll give you a beer. We'll sit down and talk over, reminisce, talk about old times. And they said, okay. And they showed up at his house. They'd already been drinking. And he handed them a beer, and after a little while, there was one fairly small, thin guy and one really big dude. And they'd previously been drinking. They had another beer. The big dude was getting a little bit belligerent. And he said, if you're going to be that way here in my house in front of my family, you guys can just go ahead and leave now. And he walked over and he opened the door for them. They walked out. They walked down the front steps to their car. The little one gets in the passenger seat. The big one goes to the driver's seat and says, hold on a minute, we'll be right back. And he closes the door and he walks back up and he walks right in the house. And he walked up, I'm not going to say the kid's name, but he walked right up to him and he grabbed him by the neck and he held him up against the wall like that. Now, the kid, he was a concealed weapons permit holder. So while he's being choked, and he was literally being choked, he reaches over and grabs his pistol, he pulls it out, and he went like this, and the big guy saw him do it, and reached over and grabbed his wrist and held his wrist up against the wall. So here's the gun pointing against the wall, he's being choked, and the guy choked him out, he passed out, he fell to the floor. The wife runs over just screaming at him. The big guy walks out of the house, goes and gets in the car, starts talking him on this. And they leave. When he wakes up, the wife kind of made a mistake. He said, dial 911. And the wife says, we ought to put the gun in the bedroom and not mention it. So she picks up the gun, takes his holster off, shoulder holster, puts it in the bedroom, and sticks it under the mattress. And the police come and hear his whole story minus the gun. Tells them everything true except for minus the gun. And then the police officer leaves, goes and hunts down the other two guys, arrests them, takes them to the department, and starts interrogating. And the big guy goes, well, he pulled the gun on me. Oh, he didn't mention that. So he goes back and he arrests him. And now they're both in division. He posted bond. They let him out until trial. He's out. He calls me. I meet him the day before. He called me that night. We speak for 3 hours on this stuff. And his wife is so scared because I said, there's only one way you can go to jail. You have an attorney, you're competent, and you sign something. Or your attorney signs something. If you have any of those three things, you will go to jail. So I said, you got to fire your attorney. His wife wouldn't let him. So I called his cousin, who I knew, and I said, can you show up tomorrow half an hour before court and talk to the attorney? Here's what I want you to say. You tell the attorney to object to every single thing the prosecutor says. Everything. You object to it, you rebut it, and you fall through it. And if you don't do it, we're putting the attorney in jail. That's what I'm to tell them. We're going to be there watching. We'll put the attorney in jail. She shows up. She talks to the attorney. She tells the attorney this. The attorney's pissed off. But she doesn't because somebody's there staring at her the whole time. So she objects to everything the prosecutor said. They dismissed the jury. Everybody got excused for a little while. They thought they were all going to lunch. Before they even got out of the building, the jury was done. And they called them back in. They he was found not guilty on all 14 charges. Not guilty anymore.
And they fired it attorneys.
No, the wife would fire the attorney. So we had to force the attorney to do her job and object. Okay, and he went. But if you have an attorney, you're competent, or you sign something, you're going to jail. 99.9% of the time. The railroad, you get to jail.
Usually when you object, or whether you're doing it yourself or an attorney, you have to object and then have
A reason why.
reason why.
Hearsay.
Also, basically object, hearsay, objection, hearsay.
Sure. Where was the first-hand witness? And look at his case. He had the husband and wife in the house, and the big guy was all in the house. The kids were asleep in bed. Okay. Police officer wasn't the first-hand witness. The other guy was outside. Now it comes down to the testimony of two people. And here's the guy that's married who owns the house. And here's the guy that's not, who just choked him out. Okay? And the other guy said he went back into the house. You know, what I'm saying is, there's no first-hand witness. They convict people without first-hand witnesses all the time, unless you object. And you say, wait a minute, where's the first-hand witness? Even a police officer isn't a first-hand witness. He shows up after the fact. He's hearsay. Okay? So if you don't take a plea deal, you're competent, and you don't have an attorney, you can't go to jail. Why? Because on the GSAs, or on the federal forms, it requires 3 signatures to put you in jail. The judges, the prosecutors, and you or your attorneys.
Minus 1, 2, 3.
No case. It's over.
You
got
said if
the
he hadn't
law.
had an attorney, would he have,
Say
would he
that
have
one
said he
more
wasn't
time.
competent?
Uh,
If he hadn't had his attorney, would he have said he was not competent?
well, he could have tried, but see,
You object.
to be incompetent is a two-edged sword for the judge in the court. If they find him incompetent, they can't put him in jail. If he's competent and he doesn't have an attorney and he doesn't sign a plea deal, they can't put him in jail.
Okay, so you don't have to sign yet.
If he's incompetent, they can put him in a mental hospital and destroy his life forever. So you want to be found competent. But if you don't have an attorney and you refuse to sign anything, you can't go to jail. Gina Nelson. Talk about Gina. Because yesterday I was on the phone with Gina with Judge Randy in the car. I said, here, say hi to Judge Randy. You know, anyway, Gina had been tried and found guilty of a crime years ago. And she was convicted. She spent 5 years in jail. She was a very, very smart, intelligent woman. Graduated from high school with honors, had a degree in psychology, ran several businesses, and she got accused of the same crime because somebody didn't like her that she had gone to jail for years before when she was really young. And she got accused of that crime. And she was tried, convicted, and found guilty of that crime. And I met her after her trial and before her sentencing. So I said, guess what we're going to do, Gina? We're going to fire your attorney first thing. You can't fire my attorney. I need my attorney. They're not going to. I can't go to sentencing without an attorney. Oh, sure you can. I'm just going to fire your attorney right now. So, and then I proceeded to start teaching her this stuff. And I taught her. And I told her she can't go to jail if she refuses to sign anything, if she doesn't have an attorney, and if she's competent. So we put off her sentencing for several months, and we filed a bunch of documents like her special appearance documents, her affidavit of truth and facts. We just filed a bunch of documents in her case. The judge ignored all of her documents. That's what everybody thinks. Judges read everything. They read it, they know what your intent is, they know the reason you're putting the document in, but they can't admit anything, so they're ignoring your document. Okay? Yeah. But they read them. They're there. They're on the record. They were properly served, properly published and filed. They're on the record. They read them. They have to. Okay. But you'd think they're ignoring them. But what's your intent into their brain? If there's no intent to commit a crime, you didn't commit a crime. You had to have intent to commit a crime. Okay. You can commit crimes accidentally all the time. If you didn't have intent, they can't put you in jail. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Gina goes into court, and she's a pretty headstrong, hard-headed woman who speaks her mind. And she goes into court, and she stood up for herself really well. I was really proud of her. And she says, I'm here for my special appearance. I filed all my documents. I stand firm on my documents. I'm asking for a summary judgment and for remedy to happen to me to be released. And the judge says, hold on there, you're going a little fast. And then he started to talk to her. And something he said she didn't like, and she burst out a little bit. And she said all the wrong things for a brief second. And he says, I'm going to hold you in contempt of court. Well, we get you an attorney. And she goes, I don't want an attorney. And he goes, I really think you need an attorney. And she goes, no, I don't want an attorney. And he says, I really strongly urge you to take our public defender. We'll pay for it.
Of course.
And she says, absolutely not. I don't want one of those crookeds. And she got a little bit colorful. And the marshals came up and grabbed her and started taking her through the door to hold her in contempt. And her daughter stands up. She got a brand new baby in her arms. She stands up and says, you got this, Mom.
Oh.
And the judge goes, hold on there a minute. And everybody just stops. The marshals are like froze at the door of Regina. And everybody just stops. And they put the daughter in contempt. Now guess what? They take her out of the room, past Gina. They walk her down the hall and around the corner, put her on a bench and says, sit right here, don't move. The marshals leave. They go back in the courtroom. They've done this before. They go back in the courtroom. Now they've got Mom scared that her daughter's going to be in jail with a brand new little baby, right? The baby was like 5 days old. So the judge takes that opportunity to ask Gina one more time. Gina, I'll tell the marshal's attorney loose right now if you take the public defender. And Gina turns around and says, he's fired right here, right now, retroactive back the very first second your words came out of your mouth, Judge. Lock her. And they took her out. You know what they did with the daughter? They forgot about her.
Oh.
They closed the whole building up, locked the doors to the building, left her sitting on the bench inside there feeding her baby. And she finally, after looking around the corner because nobody was coming back to get her, saw the building was over, went to the front door and the doors were locked. She finally found an emergency exit, hit the thing, walked out, and the alarm went off in the building. And she went home, leaving the alarm going off. So anyway, in Utah, contempt is 30 days. Some states it's 72 hours. Every state has different rules. Utah's up to 30 days. So Gina, they put her in the next county jail away, one whole county away. And they tried for 30 days, 29 days to force her to take an attorney. And she just kept saying no, 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 no. Because that's what they taught her. On the 29th day, they brought her in for her second sentencing hearing. And they said, the judge looks at her and says, so you're pretty adamant about not having an attorney, huh? And she says, yep. I'm serious. He says, okay, I'll accept that. You're serious. So, to proceed with sentencing a little bit, he starts asking her some questions. Mr. Prosecutor, do you have a deal we can work out here? The prosecutor says, yeah, I have a deal right here. He says, I ain't signing that. I'm not taking your deal. Throw her back in jail for contempt. Another contempt charge. She's in jail for 29 days. Every other day, the prosecutor showed up at the jail trying to present an offer to sign. Take this plea deal or you're going to be in here for 15 years.
How much money she made off them.
Take this plea deal. You're going to be in here for 15 years.
Oh my gosh.
She says, no, 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 no. 29th day, hauls her back in for a hearing. Third sentencing. No attorney, no plea deal. I'm going to order a competency test. Throw her back in jail for contempt. Haul her to the jail. A couple days later, a psychologist shows up, starts questioning her. She goes, I went through kindergarten through 12th grade by a government-funded school system, and I got a certificate of competency called a diploma. She says, I've got a degree in psychology, in fact, the same one you have hanging on your wall. I run several businesses. I've submitted over 700 pages of court documents on my own in my court case. And I've stood there every time in court without an attorney. The psychologist says, you're competent. Sign off. She's competent. 5 days later, the judge hauls her into a hearing. Her third or fourth sentencing hearing. Says, Gina, you won't sign anything. She says, no. You won't take an attorney. She says, no. You're competent. You're dismissed. And she walks out of the parking lot and hugs her 90-year-old mother in the parking lot. I got a picture of it on my iPad. She was tried and found guilty. The penalty was 15 years in prison. She spent less than 90 days in contempt. Now understand, contempt is not a jail sentence. It's a go stand in the corner behind locked doors. That's what it is. We're punishing you. Go stand in the corner until you comply. That's what contempt of court means. Contempt of court is not a sentence for a crime. It's a sentence because they don't like you. They don't like your demeanor. Okay?
Is that legal? Or not legal? How can they even do that? Just hold you in contempt for not complying.
They don't have to have a reason. It's in their local rules.
Oh God.
And in their local rules, it says they can break their own rules. It's true, it's in there. Every time you go or get involved with the court, ask for the rules of the court. You need to know what rules you're operating under, or they're operating under. And there are rules that say, you got 10 days to do this, 30 to do that, and it'll tell you in there. It'll also tell you a judge is an administrator, he can administrate it. He can make up his own whatever. Right. So, there you have it. If you don't have an attorney, you don't take a plea, and you're confident, you're gonna go home. And we've probably got 15 people that we've happened to catch after they've been tried and before sentencing. And that's happened. We've saved years of their life.
What about those that have been convicted and already stopped?
It's harder.
You can
Possession
get
is
the right-
90% of the law. So once they've got you, it's harder and harder and harder to get you out. The farther in you go. You guys, if you can handle everything and sit in the first 72 hours, you got everything is banking. What is an indictment? It's a true bill. If you can't pay the bill, you're brought up on charges. If you can't pay the charges, you're asked to bond. If you can't pay the bond, your body's held as surety. Well, they steal from your Social Security trust. Everything is banking. In banking, what's the first rule? You have a 72-hour right of rescission of any contract. So you get a letter in the mail to your all caps name. In a 45-degree angle with a red Sharpie, if you don't like the terms and conditions of the contract, you write your offer to contract is not accepted, set return within 72 hours, sign your name to it, and send it back. It's rescinded.
So if you on the side of the road, you send it to the police department.
No. You send it to the address of the court that's on the bottom of the ticket that you're supposed to appear 30 or 45 days from now. And you do it within 72 hours.
Here they have the police department that, on the backside or whatever, it says if you want to pay this, you can send it right to that address, which is the police department. Okay, but then if you don't want to do that and fight it, then they take it to the court, and the court, court
Send it to the court.
I think the address and stop the should express the should
I think it would have ran right over the top of it. He hasn't watched him do it a million times. Is it true? Yeah. They find ways around it. They throw out all these bear traps and just hope you step into it. And you'll screw up. You'll screw up your language. You'll screw up all kinds of things. That's why it's best to handle it right away. The day you got your summons, 72, just right across it.
But you still have to show up in court.
Oh,
Get a summons in the court,
A
you
lot of
say you're not
times that
accepting
will
it.
stop the court date. You'll never have a court date.
Because I've heard of people go to court and they're like, yeah, I got a date here, and they're saying.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
I know.
And some, yeah, I've heard success stories with that, but then I've also heard some people say, later on they had a warrant for their arrest, and it's like, yeah, a warrant for my arrest, when I was at court, I asked for it, and they said, got nothing for you.
It depends. Somewhere you got to check. That's why when people say, "Oh yeah, I tried that shit and it didn't work," I say, "Show me the court transcripts. Tell me everything that happened, and I'll show you where you screwed up." Because it's easy to screw up. That's right. It is. So let's go back. We got way off subject here, trying to explain these simple things. Go back to the court. What is the law? Where does ordinance come from? How do we arrive at this thing called law where a small group of men put something down on paper, hold me accountable, and you shut up? You let the judge answer. 9 times out of 10, people run their mouth when they shouldn't. Anything you say can and most definitely will be used against you. Okay? So, you ask questions and then shut up. When they answer, that opens the door for you to correct their answer. You always have an opportunity to rebut anything they say. So if the judge spews out something that's not this, you say, "Hold on there just a minute, Judge. I might just be a dumb farm boy from a mill town, but Genesis 1:26 gave me dominion of the land, air, and water. This is law. It's common law, ecclesiastical law, admiralty law, it's rights, it's trusts, it's contract. These are the three jurisdictions. Which jurists are we talking about here? And he'll say, oh, it's contract law. Great. Now we've got it narrowed down to 1 + 1. It really is 2. It's all about contract. Bring forth the contract. Show me the contract. What proof or in truth and fact and evidence do you have that I'm an employee of government? What proof in truth and fact and evidence do you have that I'm an employee of the county of whatever this is? Or the state? What proof in truth and fact and evidence do you have that I have a lawful and binding contract with this entity that's coming after me? What proof in truth and fact and evidence do you have that there was full and honest disclosure of that contract? Or a meeting of the minds? What proof in truth and fact and evidence do you have of the consideration of that contract? Of the terms and conditions of that contract? What proof do you have in truth and fact and evidence that there's 2 wedding signatures by 2 like parties in the contract? What proof in truth and fact and evidence do you have that there's privity of contract? Use privity if a collection agency comes after you at any time. You go to the hospital, you get a bunch of medical bills, you can't pay them all. Pretty soon it goes to collections, the collection agency comes after you and says, hey, you owe us this debt. And you say, hold on there just a minute there, buddy. I had a contract with the hospital. Did you pay off the debt to the hospital? Gosh, thank you very much. I really needed that gift at this time in my life. I really appreciate it. But you and I, we don't have a contract. There's no privity in the contract here. We're done. But thank you. Appreciate it. Bought it for like 20 cents on the dollar, and they're trying to collect. Privity is a big part of a contract. A contract is between the 2 parties that made the contract. If you decide you don't like the contract, we have to settle it. You can't just go sell it to her and her come after me for the contract. Because I didn't sign a contract with her. See? So that's, once you got that figured out, no collection agency will ever bother you again.
So you mentioned,
So, like,
is there, sorry, no, go ahead. Is there's 9 conditions to a contract?
8.
8, so I didn't get the first, I have consideration, terms and
Got a
signatures,
cute little
privity.
paper I wrote on that. That you can have. So you can
You
email.
just have to ask for it.
That's right.
The
You just
8.
have to ask.
The 8
Ask and it shall be
terms
given.
of the contract.
Say that again?
The
8
terms
parts of the
the
contract.
8 parts.
Yeah.
Yeah, not
I got it
terms.
this time.
Just to save you time, we could collect everyone's email address and numbers, and you can mail it to Kristen, let's mail it out to her.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's what they did in Arkansas too. Everybody just passed around a notebook and put their contact numbers and email and share
He
it with
doesn't
the
have to
group.
send them to everybody.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, she had a question too. That-
So that would apply as if, for instance, student loans, like there's a lot of expenses through the government agencies, we have a third party.
they sell it, they sell it, they sell it.
Sell it.
And don't try with mortgages. Even though it applies.
Right, right.
You know, mortgages, you can go in and prove all the fraud you want.
Mhm.
You can prove that bank committed fraud, you can go into court and prove it, the judge will agree with you.
Mhm.
Yep, that's fraud.
Mhm.
I'm rolling for the bank.
Oh, absolutely.
You know why?
Because they're owned by,
Because
they are
you
the bank.
didn't own your property in the first
Yeah,
place.
you don't own it. It's just a.
You don't own
Of the.
The state owns it. All property shall be vested in the state.
So how do you get OCA? Can we do that?
That's class 6.
Yeah, that's class
Or
tomorrow.
go to Denver? Just kidding.
Yeah.
You know, a scam, I mean, I don't wanna call it a scam, but,
It is.
I owe Sprint. Well, Sprint says I still owe them from, about 3
What does that mean?
And then
Yeah.
a collection agency within Sprint, so, you know what I'm saying, so when we're trying to say that.
Are you a
Sprint has-
separate company?
If there's,
Where's your-
And they always say, no, we're a Sprint. I'm like, well, how can you be a Sprint over 3 years ago, 4 years ago, what is that? I was like, you guys did, I said, Sprint had to have sold it off to a collection agency. And they're like, no, we're the collection
What
agency.
is what is the name of the
first
company?
year.
They don't have
You just have to say.
they say that they're with Sprint, but I'm sure Sprint has not been sitting on this debt for the past 3 or 4 years.
Sure. They're a big enough company they could.
They have a small price.
Yeah. But they're a big enough company they can sit on it for.
Because that, you know, like.
If they can't collect it,
Like
sell
they
it.
call, I'm just like, not bugging me, but, you know, I'm looking at this committee thing.
It depends. If it's a different name and they have a corporate charter,
I was telling them, send me the new bill. And I was telling them, send me the bill that shows that I signed the contract off. And they always say, you know, Mr. Rizzo, you know,
well, burden of proof is on you. See? Is it, what time is this?
Until 9:20.
What time are we supposed to be out here?
9 o'clock.
Well, you could have told us.
All right, no problem.
You
We're having
probably
too
want
much
to go
fun.
home.
Yeah.
Let's call it